In the meantime, we're watching shares of CrowdStrike. They are down by about 12% in today's session in the wake of those outages. With more on what this disruption means for the company and others in the cybersecurity industry, we're joined by Trevor Walsh, Citizens JMP Securities Equity Research Analyst. Trevor, thank you so much for joining us. At the very least, this is not a good news headline day for the likes of this company. So where do they go from here? How do they address this? And is this just sort of a short-term issue, or is it going to be a longer-term one?
Yeah, thanks, Julie. Great question. I think in this interim period, it's certainly, as you said, pointed out, it's not something that the company wants to happen. But I would point out that in terms of outages caused by cyber tools, maybe on a smaller scope, that's not necessarily an uncommon occurrence. In my prior life, kind of working in industry, we saw this happen quite frequently, especially with endpoint security tools, because of the nature of their access to operating systems. You do everything you can to kind of mitigate those risks around testing before you launch and going into production, et cetera. But clearly there were some hiccups or mistakes made on this end. So I would commend the company and Mr. Kurtz kind of going on shows throughout the day-to-day and kind of being very transparent in how they're both fixing the issue itself and looking to work with customers on the go forward. So I think in terms of just the brand reputation, yes, some damage certainly, but I think the company's doing everything kind of above board and as best they can to, I think, help customers through the situation.
Trevor, it's interesting. I saw some of your colleagues on the street who also covered this name saying the timing of all this, though, from CrowdStrike's perspective, is not great, they said, Trevor. The point being, it's happening the last 2 weeks of the quarter, which they pointed out are very important for the company, could limit Q2 upside. I'm curious, just as a financial analyst, how are you thinking about that issue?
Yeah, I think it's certainly one to consider. Timing is everything with a lot of these things, and when you're at that 2-week crunch, less than that at this point for them, that is when you are kind of all systems go of trying to bring in those POs and whatnot. And those types of issues when they come up can even if it's the customer not acting nefariously or trying to rake you over the coals from a price perspective, that can cause pause around a deal for sure. Again, I think the criticality of CrowdStrike as a security platform tends to, I think, outweigh some of those issues in the sense of customers can't afford to just turn them off and not renew because of one incident. They're too tied into the ecosystem. They're too critical of a tool kind of within the overall stack. So I think those conversations certainly have the potential to emerge, but I can see the company kind of doing what it needs to do to kind of make customers right. Could there be a little bit of noise around the quarter? Absolutely. But I think that's a little bit more one-off basis rather than like kind of a broad-based risk.
Well, at the same time, Trevor, in terms of how the market is reacting, well, if CrowdStrike is down, some of its competitors are up. I mean, we see a gain in shares of Palo Alto Networks. We see a gain in shares of SentinelOne, for example. Do you think some of its competitors will be able to capitalize and take some share?
I think in terms of significant market share type of movements, I don't see that at this point. Could there be anecdotal wins within kind of the immediate, again, next couple of weeks and into the next quarter? Sure, because I think that there are some customers that might either be evaluating new endpoint solutions to kind of net new and have CrowdStrike and SentinelOne, for example, side by side, and maybe this helps to make that decision kind of less favorably in CrowdStrike's favor. But I think that benefits SentinelOne a little bit more versus Palo Alto, just given the scale and scope of those two businesses. And kind of one or two big wins to SentinelOne means a lot more than a single, maybe smaller deal taken away by Palo Alto from CrowdStrike. But I think your former guest, Ms. Johnson, kind of set the tone pretty well in terms of just generally how companies seem to be reacting broadly to this incident. It's more of a team, all hands on deck. Let's just get critical infrastructure, key companies within that use CrowdStrike and Microsoft up and running again. I think companies that would sort of use this as an angle in a real aggressive way might think twice about that. Just again because I think they could very much be kind of in the same boat later down the line.
Trevor, broader question for you. You've seen this kind of trend of consolidation of vendors in cyber, Trevor. And I'm curious whether going forward you think there'd be more scrutiny of that trend, just because maybe some folks think, Trevor, maybe it's better we have more players instead of fewer.
Yeah, and I think that's right, Josh, in terms of at least people taking a look at that priority or that strategy. But regardless, I think that there's the platform strategy and trend from the side of the vendors like CrowdStrike, like Palo Alto, but then there's also the overall take from CISOs and the users where they're not necessarily wanting to consolidate and have a mega monolithic single tool in their environment for the reason that that creates one single point of failure. So I think you have to kind of differentiate a little bit between the marketing speak of the vendors and then the actual users themselves. And to be sure, there's, given where the macro environment is and budgets are, there's definitely, I think, opportunities for tool consolidation, but I don't think we necessarily live in a world where, Microsoft, CrowdStrike, Palo Alto become the singular security tool for these large enterprises. It's just not kind of the way in which I see things heading.
Trevor, thank you. Helpful perspective on this whole situation. Appreciate it.
Thank you.